Hi, good evening, everyone. Hi, Parvati ji. Hi, Maya ji. Hi, Madhav. Okay, I'm going to. Hi, nice to see you here. I'm going to send Maya ji an invitation now to join. Hi, Indu. Hi, Rohini. Maya ji, I've just joined. I just, you just need to accept my invitation and. Hi,
Hello.
good evening. I mean, good morning.
Good morning for me. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Maya ji, for my invitation and for agreeing to be in conversation. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
So, for the benefit of those who've logged in, I just want to set the context for this conversation. And I want to say that I first actually had the opportunity to meet Maya Kulkarni when I invited her for Alap's first look. It was inspired by the idea of open rehearsals, and Mayaji was one of the observers, mentors. And since then, I've been wanting to have an exclusive conversation with her. I mean, we've had conversations offline, but here we are, finally making that happen. So, thank you so much. I'm just going to introduce Maya Kulkarni to everyone in short, and then we'll dive into our questions. Described by the New York Times as a dancer choreographer, Maya Kulkarni is a well-known figure in the Indian dance world. She has a long and illustrious career as a performer of Indian classical dance in the US and in India. Gifted with a natural aptitude for rhythm and grace, she trained under some of the greatest gurus of her times, Guru Parvati Kumar, Sri Dandayudapani Pillai, and Sri Kittappa Pillai. She was invited to perform in the Lincoln Center Dance Festival twice, and she's performed across several well-known venues in New York City. For the last decade or so, Mayaji has focused increasingly on creating new dance pieces in the style that she calls Shilpa Natana, and we're going to be talking to her about that. This new genre of dance style, as she defines it, departs from the conventional repertoire and even conventional techniques, but stays rooted within its broad framework. Mayaji has also brought her academic knowledge of political philosophy to pick themes such as Plato's allegory of the cave and media and set them into the Shilpa Natana style of dance. Similarly, she proposed an hour-long production of The Four Horses of Apocalypse that was choreographed for four young classical dancers. There is a lot more, but I'm going to keep it, I'm going to stop now and I'm going to get straight into the questions. So, Maya ji, without much ado, I want to talk a little bit about the two projects in progress.
Yes.
We, half an hour ago, shared a rehearsal video of Kundalini Rising as well as Kavacham. So I want you to, which will premiere as part of the Battery Dance Festival, the 40th edition of Battery Dance Festival. I wanted you to just speak a little bit about, if you could walk us through the core, premise, personality of these two works, and then we'll sort of, take it from there.
It is in a way, a continuity of the kind of work I do. Um, I'm always moved by themes that are larger than immediacy of life, that many of our dance, traditional dance padams describing a situation, etc. there. I like to deal with universal themes. So Plato's allegory, for example, or Medea, or, the way in which I compose Ardhanarishvara, or the more traditional, pieces closer to tradition. I wouldn't call it Bharatanatyam in the conventional sense, but it adheres to the tradition of Natya Shastra, but not the convention that has evolved in Bharatanatyam. So I take liberties in that sense. So Kavacham falls in that, both those, Kundalini Rising and Kavacham falls within that category of dance work, where it begins with the sunrise and ends Kundalini rising, ends with the sunrise, and begins with the sunrise, ends with the sunset. So
Okay.
I bring out the Ratha, we got three dancers, the Surya Ratha, is a chariot rising, and then going into the Dhyana, and in that the emergence, the awakening of energy through chakras. So the chakra idea, energy idea lends itself beautifully to nritta and different dance positions. So I've used the three dancers in that way. The excerpt I sent you does not have the Kundalini part because we didn't want to give away everything. We just wanted to awaken some curiosity.
Right.
But there is that whole setup there, that we do. And in the end, we take the Ratha, Surya Ratha out, which is, I used a lot of Pakhavaj instead of Mridangam.
Right.
Because the Pakhavaj has a different resonance. So
Right.
these things are important for me. So I do
Right.
not, as I said, adhere to the convention, but I adhere to the tradition of the Natya Shastra, of the dance forms.
Absolutely.
And
In fact,
Kavacham is continuity of that. You're quite right when you mentioned that sounds like a continuity. In a sense where I have imagined that the Vishnu, Brahma, Shiva are fused entity. So the dancers begin as a fused entity and separate themselves out. And we have dealt with the iconography and certain episodes, but not full episodes, iconographic episodes, description of episodes. So the three bodies are used in a way that recreates those particular things, like the Narasimha Avatara. We're not showing the whole the story, but using the iconography to create that thing, and that lends itself beautifully to dance. And they go back and fuse themselves. So once again, cosmic being, the idea, elemental idea that go down to the large themes. I enjoy doing those things. So that's what it is. Kundalini.
Maji, you spoke about you've not used the Mridangam, but you've used the Pakhavaj. I also read in the bio that you shared with me earlier this morning, where you talked about way back in the 70s and the 80s, you had experimented, using Hindustani music. Of course, now it's pretty common, right? Music has. But back in the day,
yes.
I want to ask you a little bit about, have you always been somebody who has sort of, treaded a path of your own? I mean, very early on, rather.
Well, for me, music is music. And of course, music lends itself, certain kind of music lends itself readily to dance and other doesn't. So you have to really be very sensitive to that thing. But Hindustani music, I use that for Abhinaya pieces a lot. I also had somebody compose a Varnam as well as a Jatiswaram at that time, and I performed it at Carnegie Hall, as a matter of fact. Yes.
Wow.
And I had fantastic, phenomenal, there was live music. I had musicians, Ramnath Raghavan was on Mridangam, he's no more. Madhav Bhatke, who was a superb Agra Gharana vocalist, was on that, and then other accompaniment who were very well versed. So it just so happened I was lucky, that these people were there and I were willing to work, and I was able to work and produce this work early on, very early on. Yes.
Right. Maji, would you think that the use of music could change response? Like, do you think that music has that crucial role to play where a particular type of music could, alter the way a dancer responds to it? Like,
You're talking about factoring in dance audience situation.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I have a very interesting experience with audience. I performed here for a very long time, and in India and elsewhere. And I found that I can talk about New York audiences, all right? I can't talk about other than New York audiences. I found that when you produce something that is authentic, you're presenting it to its full, in its full inner beauty, exploring that, the audiences sit, even if they don't understand everything. You see, I think they don't have to understand everything. I think that it is as much receiving as we see a painting. You know, we don't have to understand why this line is here or why that line is there. But the overall impression stuns us, attracts us, holds us. I think dance is a visual painting that is moving, dynamic. In that sense, and the Western audiences respond to that beautifully. Wherever I have performed Varnams that go almost like 40 minutes, and there has been nobody moves, nothing. That is because you try to do the right thing, you know, and it somehow speaks to the audience.
Right.
So I'm never in a way kind of, I don't wish to compromise. I never compromise for the sake of audiences presenting something that's entertaining so that I can hold their attention. I'm a little, shall we say, open, you know, indifferent about it. If they don't hold their attention, they can leave. I don't mind, you know. But as an artist, I'll do what I have to do.
That's fantastic. Maiti, I want to ask you a little bit. I want to go back to Kavacham and
yes.
And I want to ask you that somehow from the sound of it and from what you told me, there is a certain sort of in both these works, there is a whole idea of the energy around, the energy within, the interconnectedness of the body, mind, soul. Perhaps a little bit of the concept of yoga. I want you to talk a bit about, you know, sort of this whole force that, you know, that sort of connects them, where you're harnessing the potential within and sharing that expansively with a larger unit. So would you talk a little bit about your choreographic process? Because, you know, for us in India, we don't get a chance to, you know, hear you often. So if you can talk to us a little bit about your choreographic process in terms of how an idea occurs to you. How do you let an idea marinate? How do you take it forward?
You know, Akhila, how ideas come, frankly, and I'm not being, you know, sort of unnecessarily obtuse about this, but I don't know where they come from. Okay, they come from my upbringing, my exposure, my experiences, my gurus, my engagement in lifetime engagement with dance and music and other arts forms, you know, painting, sculpture. So I can't tell you how it comes. If you ask me now, how did you think about these two? I really couldn't tell you. But it begins with the kernel of an idea, but always with the music. I don't just get ideas. I hear things in my head, and it moves that way. For me, dance and music move together. I think for most dancers, I'm not unique in that sense. And that the music also develops along with dance. Somehow, so once I start with the idea of energy, then I had one dancer on the floor, another into the deep Aramandi, and third one sort of standing up. So we had a staircase, if you like, you know, of three bodies, and the you know, the mudras and the movements for the energy rising. So it is picked up by the second one and picked up by the third one, and it continues to expand as the dancers expand their movements. It expands, and then is the complete, you know, dhanam, that complete release is where the cover, that particular part ends. So this, and then we kind of go back to the routine of the sunrise and sunset, and the ratha goes out. So it is framed within a day, in a sense, a cycle, time cycle, and it goes that way.
Lovely. Mayaji, I know that you're really, fascinated with sculptures. I want to
Yeah,
ask you, as a child, were you raised in an environment where you had a lot of exposure to,
yeah.
watching sculptures? Because I often wonder, how does one develop a love and appreciation for sculptures?
Um, I think best way to talk about it are two particular works that I have done. One was Medea, which is, Greek queen.
Yeah.
Uh, she's a famous figure in the art world. I mean, so much has been, so many sculptures, so many paintings. So I was standing in the Metropolitan Museum. There's a lifetime, painting. Huge painting. I was so stunned of Medea. So she is veiled, looking away like this, voluptuous, beautiful figure. That the way the Greek
Yeah.
the paintings are, and she has two children. That she's holding against her breast body, but in one and she's under kind of in a dark. Her face is dark, veiled, looking, one doesn't quite know where, it's kind of inside, looking inside, and she has a dagger in her hand.
Right.
The painting was so powerful, Akhila. I sat in front of it for a very, very long time, absorbing it, not even the slightest idea that anything is going to happen with it. I went away, but it kept on working in my head. After a while, I decided this is what I want to do. And the idea just came through. So I was not going to tell the story of Medea, no. But I was going to explore the 3 or 4 complexity of her character. She's a sorceress, she's a proud queen, she's a mother, but she also is desperately and passionately in love, and to such an extent so jealous that she cannot even tolerate the love that her lover has for her children whom
Uh-huh.
she has born with him, and
Right.
so she murders them
Of
in
course.
Medea. So look at the complexity of this character that is all in this one painting. It
Wow.
was for me to explore that, and I did. And I had a wonderful artist who was able to do it, Mesma, with whom I have done a lot of work, because
Right.
Mesma has certain unique qualities. She is extremely well trained, but she is able to do things that many dancers are unable to do because of her training in modern dance, because of her being a painter, sculpture, so she moves with me. We're on the
Yeah.
same page. So anyway, so that was done. The other much more recent thing I can tell you is the Tridha, where I had these 3 beautiful sculptures, temple sculptures we have. A woman with a parrot, you've seen that,
Yeah.
in many. Then a woman who is a huntress, and a woman who is looking in the mirror, right?
Mm.
Now, these are very famous sculptures. If you find them in every temple. Idea occurred to me, and I created a 40 minutes, 45 minutes piece with 3 dancers, each doing a part of it. One doing the woman with the parrot. But
Yeah.
I wrote the story because there is no story associated with that sculpture. It is just a decorative sculpture in the temples. So I
Right.
wrote the narrative, I wrote the story, I created the story, and just go to the one where I imagine that this parrot, whom she loves, is like her jiva, you know, her herself.
Yeah.
And so she dances with the parrot. The parrot walks on her hand, you see. He pulls at her hair. He sits on her shoulder. So there is kind of a bodily connection with the
Right.
parrot. But
Right.
the parrot is unhappy. Parrot wants to fly away into the
Right.
sky, and she tries to cajole him, all that, offer him things, don't go, you're my heart, etc., etc. Finally, because she loves him so much, she must set him free. So as she sets him free, her heart begins to race and eventually stop. You see? So that is the story. So all my stories usually have a dark twist. So the other two are equally, I won't go into that, but the mirror story is very interesting because he's a woman who is totally captivated by herself and her beauty.
Yeah.
She's very narcissistic, and she's constantly, looking at the mirror, and she says, now this is the mirror, woman with the mirror, which is just a decorative sculpture. So she asks her friends to put all the mirrors all around her, and she goes around. But there was one thing she couldn't do. She could not look at herself at night. But she's so tempted because she's so used to looking at herself all the time. Finally, she gives in to temptation and looks at herself in the night. And the curse was, if she did, she would get uglier and transformed. And she goes and looks at herself and she sees changes. So she rushes to the second mirror, to the third, to the fourth, to the fifth. And everywhere she's getting older and older and uglier and uglier. Finally, she destroys all the mirrors and falls to the ground. So that, it's a twist on that Shringara thing, which is what we do, in Odissi or in Bharatanatyam or any dance forms.
Right. Beautiful. I really enjoyed these stories that you said. Majik, would you be able to talk a little bit about how now these sculptures have inspired you to create a style of dance of their own, right? You call it Shilpa Natana, right?
Yes.
Would you be able to talk a little bit about it?
Yes. I call it Shilpa Natanam not to be, there is no literary conceit involved in that. It is just what it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I do imagine dancers stepping out of a sculpture, dancing stepping out of a painting.
Yeah.
And then I build a story, as I have told you. So what do I call it? So I called it Shilpa Natanam. But not the process of doing that. The process is I have to have a character. I give it a human character, even to animals. Many of my dance pieces greatly focus on different beings, different animal in the animal world. For example, a squirrel.
Oh.
You see? So I will use the idea of the squirrel. I would use not the conventional thing like the peacock and the koel and so on, but I go to other animals too. For example, in the Plato's, allegory of the cave, there is a whole section which uses, because these are shadows, the world is passing, and these prisoners in the cave were chained, prisoners in a metaphorical sense, not in real sense, are looking at shadows passing, imagining this is the real world. This is what reality is like. They have no other idea of what reality is.
Right.
So they're looking at these figures, and in that whole area, that whole section, I have used different animals, elephants coming and horses coming, and a tiger, hunter, a couple, old woman. You have a variety of figures, and each one takes a individual characteristic. There is a character to that particular, even if it is for 1 minute, 30 seconds, there has to be a character to my thing. And I imagine what the character would be, and I think of movements accordingly. Let me give you another example outside Plato, the life of a day in the life of a bee.
That's right, yeah.
Which I'm composing right now with Sonali Skandan, another beautiful dancer. So, so I'm imagining this bee, but I decided I don't want to do the usual thing, a bee flying, sitting on the flower, nectar, looking at, I didn't want to do that. So I imagined this bee to be very mischievous, very funny, a little weird, but essentially humorous, wanted to create hasya, wanted to create the rasa of hasya.
Right.
So I have given the movements to the bee in the process of doing things, flying here and flying there, where she observes the rest of the world. So for example, she flies off to Turkey and she watches this phenomenally fantastic Turkish folk thing, and she's fascinated by it. Now, see, this is a character, okay? Fascinated by it, and she wants to do what they are doing, but of course, she's a bee, so she can't do what she can do. So it becomes weird and funny, all right? So, as an example, so this is how I build things. So I unpack a figure, I unpack a sculpture, I unpack an idea, but I give it human character, and that allows me. So much of my choreography is nritya, which includes both abhinaya part, you know, being something, and dancing that. So nritya and abhinaya combined in nritya is usually my genre of the kind of things that I work, things I do.
Lovely. Mayaji, I was going to ask you that, you talked about you unpack. I'm just curious that you also have like a day job. I mean, you work as you teach political science during the day. I mean, I'm just curious about, so you don't have luxury in that sense of thinking about dance like 24/7, right? Because you have like other things there. So I'm just trying to understand, like, how do you allocate time? How do you compartmentalize, if at all, that is?
Well, yes. I mean, I taught Plato and political philosophers, my courses in the graduate school. So I'm very familiar with their ideas, and I've written about it, and I've worked on it. I've read a lot about it because I have to teach that.
Right.
And there are some things, for example, there is another one, which is Foucault's panopticon, okay? Which is the idea of a prison. I don't want to go into that, it will take us far off. But there are metaphors that philosophers use invariably, to talk about that, to talk about their ideas and the logic of the idea. And the logic is so sharp because that's what philosophy is about. So it is easy to create a narrative from that logic. But what you need is not logic, but poetics. Right? You need poetics. So even Sanskrit, it's poetics. I would not say poetry per se, but poetics is what you need. Greek poetics, okay? So you draw from that. You go to the metaphor. You unpack the metaphor. We already know, because that's what I study. I know what the metaphor means.
Yeah.
The cave is a metaphor by itself. Okay, it is not some cave. It is a cave that we build around ourselves and tie ourselves in by our likes, biases, and prejudices. And we don't see the reality, the great world out there of real reality. Only when you walk out of that cave and are no longer subject to propaganda, brainwashing, I'm using the harsh terms, but any kind of socializing of that kind, do you walk out of it? Do you see the reality because you're willing to? And this walking out is not walking to some divine, like in the Vedic or, Hindu philosophy, that you realize and you're walking out. The Greeks, Plato, for example, is walking out is reality in terms of that absolutely objective logic, reason. That's what Plato talks about. To him, it's not God, it's reason. So reason, beauty. And see, he says beauty in reason. Beauty, reason is truth. The three things come together. Now imagine what a fantastic, thing that is in the metaphor of the cave. And so I have built a whole 40 minutes piece on this. It's come out very well, and it really speaks to the Greek. So if you ask me how I combine politics, political science, and this, it is in this way. Ideas percolate across the board, for me, and they take shape.
Right. Maji, when did you know you wanted to sort of, be a teacher, like a professor, like an academic? When did you decide that you wanted to?
It just happened. I didn't decide it, but some ideas were there, and I said, I would like to do it this way, but it cannot really be done in the conventional way in which we have the repertoire we had, like Varnam or Jatisaram or Swarajati, or whatever, ways we can sort of even within the new experimental. Plato could not be danced that way because it required open boundaries. It required reaching into a different body, your own dancer's body, a different body, okay? And many of those things, like Medea also required that. While the Abhinaya was directed, and by the way, I'm not an adherent to very highly dramatized, what we call Natya Dharmi, I'm much more Sahaja, much more Lok Dharmi thing. Although these are artificial boundaries, I recognize that, but my inclination is to go that way. And therefore, real life experiences are easily depicted. Humor, fun, weirdness.
Yeah.
I don't take myself seriously, okay? No, I think dancers should laugh and they should produce things. Humor is totally lacking in our dance form, right? Would you not agree? But it's a very important part of the rasa, 9 rasas, but we don't explore it except in a sarcastic way. Irony. We use it as an irony, but we don't use it, in the really laughing out loud just for the fun of it.
Right.
That is somewhat, limited in use. So I like to explore that kind of thing.
Right. Maji, you talked about metaphors, and do you feel like in a certain way that because you teach, philosophy and political science, and in a certain way, like dance is also about sort of an abstraction of metaphors, right? So do you feel there is a certain sort of learning from both of these worlds that in a certain way intersect?
Yes. Are you asking me how does that work? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Kaustuvi, one of the Odissi dancers, she's a wonderful Odissi dancer. She did this thing with the parrot,
Right.
So the parrot became, as I said, Jivatma for me, all right, of this dancer. In the sculpture, just a parrot, sitting on the shoulder of this woman. Why is this metaphor necessary? To explore the relationship between the self and the other self, in a sense. Okay? And the other self is depicted by the parrot, and use that metaphor to build a whole 10 minutes dance piece around it. You have to see it. I don't know, dance is visual. You can only describe it up to a point. But beyond that, you just have to see it. I hope we can bring Trida sometime, because all 3 dances are fabulous. Really very well. Kaustuvi is fabulous. Bharti has done a phenomenal job. And Sri Lakshmi Govindan, who's a Kuchipudi dancer, is a superb dancer, and her Abhinaya is so, she worked very hard at it, and she said, it's so hard for me to do this. She was complaining to me that I had to really step out of my Kuchipudi self to explore this Abhinaya. I said, do it, and she did. So that metaphors are, and just to say one thing, my family, my father was a Sanskrit scholar. My brother and my father used to converse in Sanskrit just for the fun of it. I never got to that level of proficiency, but I was taught the entire Kalidasa's literature by my father. Then also Buddhist literature, Dharmanand Kausambi and so on. So I had early on exposure to this, plus music, but largely Hindustani music. But because I was doing Bharatanatyam, exposure to Carnatic music as well. So dance, music and literature, poetry, was growing up. As you're growing up, you don't think about these things, but they lodge somewhere in your head. And if you're a thinking person, you're able to tap it,
Yeah.
to transform it to what you need to do.
Right. Right. Would you recommend that dancers? I also asked this incident.
Yes.
Up is now running a series in collaboration with an outfit called Learn Sanskrit, where we basically put out a Sanskrit-based post every day. Would you think that people must? It is a beautiful language. Like, would you?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. There is another very fine Kathak dancer called Jin. Jin Won.
Yeah.
Okay. She came. We were producing this 6 points. Still point.
That's right.
Exactly. A 6-point elaboration.
Yeah.
In that, she has done a
That's
Kathak
right.
part in Kathak, where she came to me because she had this Iranian poetry, where a contemporary poet is written this really heart-wrenching poetry about how the ideological, the dictatorship, which prevents him from experiencing poet's muse. Okay, the muse that poet must have in order to create poetry cannot flourish under a regime that requires rigidity in thought and action. So he has written this poetry. It was so beautiful. So I worked with Jin and I said, this is the way we will develop the narrative. I don't know Kathak. She is the Kathak dancer, but she translated the ideas into her form. Okay.
Yes.
So you can work across the forms. There is no need to be rigid or to juxtapose one with the other. Let the ideas integrate, together. Let metaphor speak. And let the form follow the metaphor rather than the other way around. I think that way you can explore the world of ideas much more readily. And I do think that the modern, this generation of dancers are well educated. They have access to a lot of things that previously we didn't have. We had to go and sit in the libraries. I remember spending so many hours in libraries, looking at poetry, taking down texts and so on. Now so much is available online.
That sounds like a luxury that we're never going to ever have access to.
So I think they can explore different poetics. Poetry is poetry, it just let it speak to you. Not every poetry will speak to you. I don't work on everything. There are some things that just don't speak to me. I'm bothered by it. I avoid that. So you have to follow your instinct,
Maiji, just as we speak about still point, Shruti Mohan is hi. So, she was also part of the Jiva Arts Festival.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you about that festival itself that you directed, Maiji. And it was such a beautiful festival. I want to ask a little bit about, pandemic sort of suddenly kind of, startlingly just suddenly forced us to, start for dancers to kind of revisit the stage, who they were dancing for, how people were actually viewing them. So dancing for the camera sort of,
Yes.
Ask you a little bit about, how has that because the gaze has shifted, how does a dancer negotiate that now? And is it challenging? And what went into the curation and the thought for the Still Point expanding itself?
So initially, we work with, this is with MESMA, in the 6 point, the particular point thing you're talking about, the creator's gaze. Initially, we were thinking about because it's a camera, it is a film on camera festival. So we needed something that was, that one can use a camera with greater finesse and expertise.
Right.
So transformation was an idea that began with. Now, question is, whose transformation? we didn't want to do the usual thing like the Narasimha avatar, like the 10 avatars, or all that Devi, becoming. We didn't want to do that. So to begin with, we decided that we'd go to we stay with Saraswati, but Saraswati is kind of a static figure, right, in a sense. So we had to go to the other side of it. But question remained this. We did that. Question is why? Why does the transformation occur? This is where my political philosophy comes in, right? Okay. So to find a reason, otherwise the narrative does not make sense, even on camera.
Right.
And then I remembered this thing my grandmother had told me, this story about how Brahma covets his own creation. Okay? And that became immediately in my head the cause for transformation as a storyline. Okay? And of course, we worked on it this way, that way, how the gaze should go, how slow should it go, how fast should it go, what happens next, etc., etc. And Mesma is superb at that. She is very good at doing this kind of work. And she, did the filming and editing of the whole thing. So my contribution in that was movements, essentially organizing movements for, whatever the storyline was, and the story. Okay? She translated, because we were under COVID, we could not meet. So she was in Boston and I was here, and so we were working in this way. But it turned out to be a very, very interesting, very nice, wonderful experiment. And we hope to do more of it, more of that kind of thing in the future. In fact, I've been asked to do a new production for a festival that is taking place in Hyderabad. I forget the name. It's a famous festival, happens annually. And they're doing it virtually this time. She's a Kuchipudi dancer. Katyayani. Okay. So she is organizing, and she has commissioned one part of it, which is the Chinnamastaki, the horror goddess. So I'm working with the ideas of some symbolic things, like hair.
Oh, wow.
Blood. I'm working. It's not taken shape but some ideas have suggested themselves to me. So we're working on it. So that's how it works. That's how it happens.
Manjeet, you also think about how, about 7-8 years ago, because I also work as a journalist, I had written a story about how, concerts are shrinking in terms of the time, right? What used to be like back in the day when people danced for like a couple of hours, now it's, dancing for much lesser, even in the proscenium. And now, of course, I don't know when is the last time we watched anyone dance on stage, but because of the virtual format, productions are becoming short, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 30. I want to ask you, as a choreographer, curator, do you think that this is an interesting format in a certain way? Does it allow dancers to also therefore pick subjects, or does it become challenging for a dancer to, to actually shrink large stories into a format like this? I'm just wondering, how does it affect and impact content, really?
It is a challenge, Akhila, because dancers, our genre of dance, whether it's Bharatanatyam or whichever, has so much demand. It demands of the dancer to put herself out there in terms of abhinaya and vistara, the sancharis. So improvisation is a very important part of our dance form. Now, if you contain it and say, oh, you have to do it in 20 minutes, it becomes a production.
Absolutely.
Okay, it changes character. So there is a compromise. Are there any silver linings? Yes. What are the silver linings? Silver linings that you have to squeeze and take out the essence of your idea.
Yeah.
Okay. It makes us think harder. It makes us think very in a focused way. So if I'm doing a 20 minutes piece, what is its heart? What is at the heart of that piece? Okay. I need to then just build around that because I don't have more time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So it does become in a way a kind of a distilled essence.
Right.
If you do have a logic and a narrative and a heart to your story or whatever piece you're doing.
Right.
But it's challenging. It's challenging in a different way. It's like writing editorial, which requires to be written in 500 words or 800 words. It is so difficult to write that, you know. I mean, I write articles or books where I have time to expand my ideas. But if I have to distill everything in 800 words, I have to cut out all the unnecessary for that, the heart.
Right.
So I think it's in a way it's kind of similar process.
Right.
Is it good or bad? Will it do change dance form? It will, because the audiences will get used to seeing something in short. That's attention, as it is, attention span is a big challenge, yes. Yeah. But now it will get worse, I think, because they got used to seeing something and then moving on.
Correct.
But what can I say about audiences? You know, Indian audiences are like that too. They don't have much attention. You need to really entertain them, I find, a lot. I don't know. This is what I hear from my colleagues, my dancer friends. Anyway, I don't want to speak about India. I'm not, familiar with it that much.
Right.
But here, they're willing to watch because they don't know what to expect.
Right.
Okay? They come to it as something that they're willing to now. They're receiving. They're willing to see.
Right.
And then you show them what you want to do. But I think this business of virtual dancing will change audiences.
Yeah. And I feel like, as I was asking you that question, Maiji, I was just thinking that it's definitely so much is, it's sort of catering to the audience, right? Everything seems catered to the audience because, so it's a bit scary as well.
Right. But I have seen some wonderful things people have done. I recently saw Vijayani Satpathy, do what was she doing? She was doing Ardhanarishwara too. But the way she kind of developed that, and she danced, it was so beautiful. Really beautiful.
I can imagine.
Similarly, I saw Devika also, virtual dance, once again, right? Mohiniyattam. And what stayed in my head is a conversation she had in the dance between Indra and Ahalya and Gautama, the three-way. Right. It was so well done because that was the heart of it. So, and so that is advantage and disadvantage, it cuts both ways.
Right. Maiji, I want to ask you a little bit about, how much do you sort of follow, work of dancers in India? I'm just curious, like, do you watch a lot of...
I try and see as much, many festivals, particularly if I've heard very good things about a dancer. Whether she's famous or not doesn't matter to me. If I've heard from my dancers friend that somebody is a very fine dancer, I want to see them.
Right.
But I must confess to you, there is so much out there, these days on YouTube. I don't see that.
Right.
Partly because I'm a choreographer, I'm a creator. I don't want to clutter my mind. I find that I have to stay away from it.
Right.
So I'm judicious in what I watch. And it has nothing to do with, as I said, being famous or not.
Absolutely.
It's just what I may have heard about or what they are doing. somebody is doing some very interesting things. Like Sonali produced this young people's festival. They're all young dancers, not they're trying to be professional, but some are working, they have to work, there is no other way to feed themselves, right? So they're halfway there, but they have the desire to be at the level of professionals. So young girls, beautiful
Right.
young girls. And they did this whole festival. And each one came up with a new idea. And they
Right.
did that for 7-8 minutes.
Right.
But it was so wonderful. They're not known names, but each one did such a beautiful job. I sincerely tell you, it was wonderful to see, because there was a freshness.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
freshness of idea and the eagerness to do, and they're putting themselves out there completely. And
Yeah,
that speaks,
absolutely.
okay? As opposed to somebody who's danced 20,000 times and is seasoned, and that is a different beauty. And
Yeah,
this has a different, appeal to me.
right. Right. Maiji, I just want to ask you one question, and we'll take if there are any questions who are
Okay.
listening in. But I want to ask you a little bit about, being a mentor. And I want to ask you, would you think there is a difference between a guru and a mentor? And if yes, then what is it? And also, as a mentor, what is what is that process, like your mentoring process? Like, are they your friends? Like, how do you kind of like, what is that relationship like in your case, actually?
I did not get started trying to be anybody's mentor. They came to me, I became one over time, because I developed a relationship with them. I
Right.
knew their sad stories, and I knew their joyful stories. I knew about their successes and their
Right.
trials and their errors, and their difficulties,
Mhm.
you know. And I'm very sympathetic to that. So you develop a
Bond.
relationship of heart, and you train their minds and their bodies.
Mm.
So you become, in a way, much more than, it's not a confidant. It is not that I know a great deal about their life or it's not that.
Right.
But I do know what, how that person feels,
Mm.
okay, about something.
Mm.
That much I'm able to gauge,
Mm.
you know. Uh, and I don't know anybody's gossip. I keep away from all that because it clutters the mind again. I just want to know a person one on one. I don't want to get involved with who thinks what of whom. That's just totally irrelevant.
Right.
And so you become a mentor, and when you become a mentor, they put faith in you. That's my responsibility.
Mm.
I take that very seriously.
Mm.
I really take that seriously, and I protect them. I try to do what I can for them.
Yeah.
That's it. That's
Absolutely.
being a mentor.
The word that's going to stay with me after this conversation is really the word heart, because you used it so many times, and I think it's applicable so much about the heart of a work.
Yeah.
Connecting with somebody first with their heart, and
Yeah.
then body and the mind. So I think that's really such a beautiful insight. Mayaji, there is a question from Vignesh, and his question is, he says, Mayadi's work includes a lot of unconventional characters that are portrayed using Bharatanatyam or other forms. How does one go about looking at traditional characters with a new perspective?
You have to develop your own perspective. How do you see, pick up something, even inanimate object, take a tree, take a bush, okay? Give it a human character. Look at it from that perspective. See what would that creeper might do, okay? How will it sway? What does the sway mean? Is it swaying with some kind of a longing? Is it swaying with some joy? Is it swaying? It will sway differently depending on the conditions. So imagination is the essence of things. Imagine and put a character into objects that we don't usually consider, which are not human, right? and our mythology is full of that. You know, Ahalya is supposed to have come out of a stone. Okay, so so there are so many. You know, we actually in Hindu thinking, we do not really make a hard line between animate and inanimate objects, and we worship inanimate objects who become animate in our dance and our sculpture and our painting. You know, so there is a continuity in the art forms. Let your imagination go. How do you do that? You do it that way. You think about it that way. Give it a human character. Then see how would that thing dance, you know, if you want to do it. And things will occur to you. I mean, there is no set formula. You draw on your knowledge of poetics, on your knowledge of, you know, literature, arts, sculpture. So much there is, so rich. I don't know how else to answer that question.
No, absolutely. In a certain way, it resonates with the response that you gave us for the question of poetry. Maiji, you talked about how sometimes you don't have to just extract its meaning. You just kind of respond to it.
Yes.
Right? You have to actually put it down, like,
yes. As you know, poetry is a very condensed meaning, collapsed into a single phrase or a word.
Right.
It is for you to unpack it. If you don't have poetic sensitivity, you can't do it. Okay? So, I mean, does everybody have poetic sensitivity? No, I don't think they do. But dancers should have. What they're dancing is visual poetry. So, it's a first requirement, you know, to be a good dancer is to have a poetic heart. Again, I go to the word heart, but you have to have poetry.
Yeah, and perhaps having that poetic heart itself is a privilege, right, Maiji?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. You can't do a prosaic development of a story.
Yeah.
It's not interesting, you know. You must take leaps.
Yeah.
Your actions and your movements must condense a world of meaning, just like in poetry, where the words condense meaning. It's for you to dwell on that and to think about what the poet is like, you know, trying to suggest, what pictures are drawn, you know, in your head as you read that phrase. You know, what feelings are evoked when you read that? Is it nostalgia? Is it longing? Is it jealousy? Is it consideration? Is it fear? You know, there are all kinds of whole gamut of emotions will be evoked by words. That's what you need to do.
Beautiful. I also want to say that the point that you made about how all of us take ourselves a little too seriously, I think that's definitely a point worth thinking about. And to also the concept of laughing out loud is also something that's completely like absent. So there's some fantastic insights you shared with us, Maiji. It is one, so I have to Instagram signs me out.
Okay, all right.
Much. You're
most welcome. I really enjoyed it, Akhila. Lovely to see you.
Maiji, thank you. In touch with everybody who watched. I'll be saving this on IGTV so you can watch it later as well. Thank you again. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.